Hello and welcome everyone back to the Stranded Publishing YouTube channel, where our upload schedule is only as predictable as our publication schedule for our RPGs. Hello, and I hope everyone has been doing well over the past few months. So, today we're going to be talking about a game that is kind of near and dear to my heart, and also at the same time drives me up the wall for complicated reasons that I find difficult to explain, so I'm making a video about them. Today we're going to be talking about an RPG that may have some of the most genius design I think I've ever seen. And that's very high praise coming from me, considering the video I made about you should read Apocalypse World, and I actually struggle to recommend reading Chronicles of Darkness to people, mostly due to the font choice. It makes your eyes bleed. Oh, God forbid you read Changeling of the Lost and actually need glasses. So, what the fuck is Chronicles of Darkness, and why are we talking about it today? Well, for those of you who aren't into deep RPG production lore, or are just a lot newer to the scene than this particular game, like myself, Chronicles of Darkness is the second edition of what is known as New World of Darkness. New World of Darkness is a discontinued setting based on the World of Darkness games of Vampire the Requiem, Werewolf the Apocalypse, and Mage the Ascension fame. The idea of Chronicles of Darkness, a New World of Darkness, was to create a new setting after the End of the World canon came to fruition in the old World of Darkness setting, and to try and revise the system into something a little bit more focused on a strong core that would be repeated throughout the games. At least, that's what's been explained to me. I haven't personally interviewed any of the individuals. Second edition New World of Darkness, or from now on, Chronicles of Darkness, is published by Onyx Path Publishing, the individuals who brought you Scion, Exalted 3rd Edition, and several other games that have, depending on who you ask, very, very mixed reviews. So with a little bit of history of Chronicles of Darkness and what it is and where it comes from today, we're going to be talking about one of the most fascinating aspects of RPG design I think I've ever seen in my time as a GM and a player, because yes, this is one of the few systems I've actually gotten to sit down as a player for. Holy shit! In fact, actually, I think Chronicles of Darkness, as a general overall system, is actually my most played system across all my years of gaming, including Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition, Shadow of the Demon Lord, and maybe Fabula Ultima is also kind of up there. I've been in 2 games for that. So, what is Chronicles of Darkness, and what does it do so well that I say it drives me up the wall, but I love it? Well, today we're going to be talking about reward structures in RPGs, and what those can be used to do. And to get into that, we have to talk a little bit about how Chronicles of Darkness is structured. Chronicles of Darkness is, mechanically, a dice pool game, specifically focusing on D10s. For those who don't know what a dice pool system is, a dice pool system is where you have a number that determines how many dice you roll. Certain values on those dice constitute a success. And then you go and you roll all your dice and count your number of successes against, normally, some kind of target. It's a very straightforward system. Chronicles of Darkness, in particular, uses a mixture of stats and skills, so you have abilities, which are your stats or attributes, such as Strength, Dexterity. I don't believe that Charisma is a skill in this game, but Manipulation, Presence, Composure, Resolve, Intelligence, Wits, Stamina. Those are all 9 of them. And then you have a very long list of skills. Both the skills and the attributes themselves are divided up into mental, physical, and social. Skill list is very long. It's like 40, it's probably not 40 skills, but it might be closer to 30. So I'm not going to be counting through all of those, unlike the 9 stats. And basically, based on the situation, the storyteller, or GM, well, storyteller's a word for GM in Chronicle systems, we may call for different roles combining different attributes and skills together so that you can make an effort to, succeed at something. Typically in Chronicles of Darkness, you only need 1 success to actually do what you want. 5 successes, or in special occasions, 3 successes, are an exceptional success, typically allowing you to use this success to in some way modify the story or introduce an element or do something extra. Now, that's also, I suppose it's worth mentioning, you succeed on an 8 or higher, and if you land a 10, or in some special cases with certain abilities, a 9 or an 8, you have the ability to roll that die again and hope for another success to add to your pool of successes. Additionally, if you roll the number that gives you a reroll, again, you get to keep rolling the die until a reroll number or higher stops appearing. 10s are almost always rerolled, with some very few rare exceptions, and some, like I said, special abilities may give you reroll 9 or reroll 8s. Now, for one, this system does make calculating your odds of successes with the way 10s and the balance of that work a little bit wonkier than other certain systems, like their more modern Storypath Ultra system, where certain success numbers give you double successes, like in Exalted, or just not doing that. But exploding dice are a lot of fun, and throwing off calculation curves like that is a blast. With that in mind, I've talked a lot about how dice work and how numbers work, and that's not really what I want to focus on today, but it is worth mentioning for part of what I'm about to say. So, additionally, we're talking about reward systems. Now, Chronicles of Darkness is itself nominally a horror game, and I say nominally because, as one of my coworkers will never stop talking to me about, some people like to play superheroes with fangs, quote-unquote, which is a high-powered version of the game where players are allowed to have very high stats with little to no justification and go around rolling big dice pools to have fun. Some of the games that Chronicles of Darkness has spawned, this is unavoidable. I'm looking at you, Mage. And in some of these games, it's really fucking hard. I'm looking at you, Chronicles of Darkness core system, also known as Mortals. So, with all of these things in mind, what are these reward systems I keep saying I'm supposed to be talking about? Well, frankly, in Chronicles of Darkness, the way that you generate XP is actually probably one of the most player-determined situations I've ever seen. For reference, at the start of a game session, players are supposed to write down 3 quote-unquote aspirations, 2 short-term and 1 long-term aspiration. Now, the long-term typically sticks around for a few sessions, but you're supposed to be writing down new shorts every session, in theory. What this is what you, the player, intend to make an effort to do. For every single short term you accomplish, and if you make notable effort towards your long term, you as a player are rewarded with a beat. What is a beat? A beat is 1/5 of an XP. I know, it's exciting. Now, the fifths of an XP thing might sound like kind of bullshit to most people who are sitting there, but you have to understand that XP requirements to upgrade skills, attributes, and other things in Chronicles of Darkness is actually fairly low. The most expensive thing you're likely to buy in Chronicles of Darkness costs no more than 5 XP. And sometimes you don't even have 5 XP expenditures to justify depending on what splat line you're playing. So with that in mind, okay, so players get to write their own goals and try to accomplish them for XP. That's actually fantastic, especially if you're doing a sandbox system. If you're trying to make a game where you've set up a setting and you let your players loose in it, giving them their own aspirations to accomplish based on the game is actually a great idea. It makes it a little bit difficult to run more focused adventures that are pre-written. However, admittedly, GMs and players are intended to work together to help determine these things. It's not meant to be a one-sided conversation where a player says, I'm going to do this, and the GM looks at everything else every other player is going to try to do and what's happening in the story and can't say, hey, I don't think that you're going to be able to accomplish that, you might want to change it, or that might not line up with what the group wants, because the nuances of making sure that your group is running together in a way that's fun for everyone is too complicated to get into for the purposes of a simple explanation. Okay, so players can generate 3/5 of an XP a session with this. Truly, what a slow XP grind this must be, especially considering that you might not always get all of your aspirations. Well, there's more. The other few ways to earn XP, one of them is just taking damage in your 3 rightmost health boxes. For reference, in Chronicles of Darkness, you have a number of health boxes that you tick off depending on how severe the damage you've taken is. For instance, if you get punched in the face, that's what's known as bashing. Bashing is simple damage that is likely to heal quickly in like roughly 15 minutes most of the time. Lethal, which is like getting shot with a knife, and aggravated, which is like having a frag grenade go off. And I believe those are actually like the straight up literal explanations. But anyways, if you get hit, if you take damage to the point you go from left to right on your health boxes, the last 3 health boxes are something that give you health penalties, where basically you're suffering dice penalties because you've been injured so severely. Taking damage in those boxes, for every person who does that, is a beat. Every player also gets a beat for playing that session. And then GMs are encouraged to reward beats for very good role-playing, making them laugh, etc. I've never gotten a beat for role-playing, but I have gotten beats for making people laugh. In addition to that, there is also a system called conditions in Chronicles of Darkness. Now, conditions are... most people are going to know, in theory, what a condition is. A condition is something that is applied to your character that applies some sort of effect, positive or negative, potentially, depending on the game you're playing, that changes how your character interacts with the game. For instance, if you have the condition drunk, your character may have penalties to anything that requires speed, dexterity, or focus of mind, etc. Now, the way Chronicles of Darkness handles conditions is actually one of the more interesting and fascinating ways that it's worked. There are 2 types of conditions, well, 3, but one of them is not relevant to this discussion. The third type of condition is tilt. Tilts are environmental effects that do not focus into the reward system that we're about to discuss. They are more just a way to be like, hey, this is happening for this scene, so you're suffering this effect while in this scene. But anyways, so the 2 types of conditions that actually matter are conditions and persistent conditions. Both of these serve the benefit of rewarding XP, or changing how your character acts based on the condition. Basically, XP rewarded roleplay. Now, I say XP, they reward beats, 1 beat per condition cleared. Or, in the case of persistent conditions, they have special beat-granting XP conditions, such as role-playing in a way that emphasizes the condition you're experiencing. For instance, if you have the persistent condition of amnesia, struggling because you don't remember things may be a way to generate a beat for that roleplay. Furthermore, the smaller conditions have clear conditions. Some of them are time, some of them are based on roleplay events, some of them are themselves set off by certain events occurring while undergoing the condition, but basically, they encourage a player to roleplay in such a way that they will clear the condition and earn the beat. Players, to some extent, want to be racking up conditions and clearing them for these positive effects. And conditions are not strictly negative in Chronicles of Darkness. There are a number of conditions which, when conferred, are positive and still grant a beat. Namely, Steadfast, which allows you to guarantee a certain success when you go ahead and perform that condition, clear that condition. So basically, if you roll and you fail, you automatically get a success, so if it's important, spend a Steadfast so you don't go get fucked. Or, in some cases, turning what's known as a chance dice into a actual single die. Not going to quite get into that. It has to do with having 0 or fewer dice. And the other major one that you're going to come across a lot is Inspired. Inspireds allow you to make it so that you get exceptional successes on 3 dice in a situation where you are rolling, and additionally, I believe they give you a willpower, along with, of course, giving you the beat for clearing them. Both of these are positive conditions that most of the time come from exceptional successes. That does mean that Inspired can give you an exceptional success chain. It is pretty fun. If you actually roll an exceptional success on Inspired. I don't think I ever have, because my dice hate me. Now, with this in mind, this is already actually, when you take a step back from the concept of Chronicles of Darkness, within the context of its existence and what it says it is, one of the most interesting sandbox reward loops available, Because if you sit here and you look at the game, look at the tools it provides you in the form of character customization, because this game is very granular and allows you to do a lot of things to customize your character, you can actually do a very interesting job telling a story and rewarding XP for the effective purpose of players setting and achieving their own goals. In a sandbox, that's amazing. And of course, Chronicles of Darkness, being based on World of Darkness, does have its different eras, such as the 80s, the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages, etc., and so on. I'm pretty sure there's probably a Roman one out there. And if you're willing to dig hard enough, there's something called Bleeding Edge, which is cyberpunk-based, although I think that's for 1st edition, but hey, you can convert it if you try. Not that hard, actually. It's fairly convertible. Most 1st edition things, in fact, are fairly convertible if you want more variety of what's already there to just slap into your own thing with a few twists and tweaks, even though the systems work somewhat differently. So with this in mind, you can easily change skills. The attributes are probably fine as they are, and actually a lot of the skills are, reasonably acceptable as written. And you can tweak these to be able to go out and have your fun running your sandbox. If you want to run a West Marches style Points of Light, ruins out and, multiple months of travel between civilization little adventure game using Chronicles of Darkness rule sets, you tweak a couple of skills, because for instance you don't need computers in your skills, and maybe if you want to include systems like magic and the like, you pull a little bit from mage, and if you don't like how much there is in mage, you tone it down at least a little bit, if not a lot of it, depending on your preference for mage or willingness to just homebrew in your own system. And from there, you are able to make a game where you have a sandbox that is almost entirely player-oriented in terms of what's happening. And that's very impressive for any game. But believe it or not, XP rewards aren't the only reward loop possible in Chronicles of Darkness. There's actually one more gameplay-influenced reward loop that's worth talking about for roleplay enforced rewards. And that is something called willpower. For reference, willpower is a special pool of points you have equal to your resolve and composure that you are able to spend to gain an additional 3 dice on any roll, or negate a 3 dice of penalty on a roll. Not exactly a guaranteed success like you can get in games like Exalted, but frankly, it's a pool of points that can seriously help you out and drastically change your odds when the chips are against you. Players want willpower, and they want to gain willpower, because willpower is, as I mentioned, a limited resources. Most of the time you get 1 back for sleeping per night. Over a long time skip, sure, that's totally fine, or if you're camping for a while and your GM is nice enough not to get you attacked while you're camping, or what have you. But the thing is, when things get tough, and you start getting down to the really long stretches of time where, minutes matter, and you're going over hours of tense rolls and exploration or gameplay, you're going to be spending potentially a lot of willpower when things are tough. And you're going to need it back, because you never know what you might need willpower for. And I'm the kind of player who's a burn it while I have it. I do not hold back in the hopes that the perfect moment will come along where I need my willpower. Sometimes I'll stop spending because I think the larger my dice pool is, the more likely I am to fail at something in Chronicles of Darkness, but that's like a personal curse. That's not a feature of the game. Statistics don't hate me, dice do. So how else do you get willpower back if not sleeping? And that comes into something that changes slightly depending on what splat you're playing, but for the purposes of keeping it to Chronicles of Darkness core specifically, virtue and vice. Humans, mortals, have a virtue and a vice. Something good about them and something bad about them, that there's like a list that you can pick from, and it's not a complete list. You can, in theory, make your own depending on your willingness and the amount of time your GM has to homebrew something up. But basically, when you perform certain actions in favor of your virtue or your vice, because yes, they do give you both, and they aren't necessarily at odds with each other, you can gain back 1 XP for doing something minorly in line with it, or if you do something heavily in line with your virtue and vice, you get back all of your XP. Now, in theory, the all of your XP thing is meant to be once a session per virtue and vice, but if you can burn through 3 pools of XP of willpower from full to 0, which no, you don't get all your willpower back at the beginning of every session. It's tracked consistently throughout sessions, but I mean, hey, assume you start at top and burn through 3 pools because you're just going through it and hitting your virtue and vice. Good for you. But again, one of the things that this does is it asks the player to sit down and define something about their character, and then reward them for acting that way. Now, unfortunately, some of the virtues and vices are written poorly, let's say. Yeah, we're gonna go with poorly, and they're really hard to pull off, like, and if they're not always virtues and vices, they get called different things and have different relationships across different splats, but sometimes you'll get a description like, don't try the same approach twice, and you look at that and you're like, how the fuck am I supposed to execute that in this scene without, like, I don't know, really twisting around what I'm doing? And, you know, you can make the argument, don't use the same dice pool twice or what have you, but it's one of the harder ones to get off in Changeling. So, anyways, yeah, I wanted to talk about Chronicles of Darkness today, everybody. A TTRPG that actually looks at motivating players to roleplay a certain way by rewarding XP and a pool of points that players can use to give themselves better odds against failure. And how that impacted sandbox play and design, because oftentimes, you know, you'll hear jokes about, oh, I was running a dungeon crawler, and only one of the players wanted to dungeon crawl, another one wanted to romance a princess, and another one wanted to open a store, and a third one wanted to be a homeless man in a pot. And, you know, I don't think any system is going to fix a party that has that many disparate goals, unless they're very good at working together and making it work. But if you have a player who focuses on social play and doesn't like combat, if you have a player who's a good fighter and wants to do combat stuff, maybe with a little bit of social or intellectual in there if they want to, sorry, social or mental in there if they want to, and a smart character who wants to play a researcher or do more mental skill-focused things, they can actually find ways to interweave their goals and work together and work with their GM. Aspirations are meant to be slightly metagamey. They tell the GM what you want to do. And the GM, for their part, is meant to sit there and say, hey, I think that this is or is not necessarily very likely to happen given what else is going on. Now, of course, sometimes the player just shoots for the fucking stars, and shoots for the moon, and unlike landing amongst the stars, lands out in space, suffocating in a vacuum of earning no beats that day. And it's happened to all of us. You know, if you play Chronicles of Darkness for an extended period of time, you're probably going to have a day where you have no beats, and it happens to the best of us. Sometimes the spotlight doesn't favor you, and sometimes you just get really fucking unlucky with your dice. But it's a system that, for its many other traits like poor layout, poor way that information is presented, kind of just being physically ugly to read sometimes, actually really has a lot of good ideas behind it that are very much worth looking at and picking up. Chronicles of Darkness normally, I think, goes on sale around Halloween anyways, so this is an appropriate spooky month video for me. Check out Chronicles of Darkness. The core system is pretty good, and, well, as a baseline, you can use it very well. Some of the books rely on it in weird ways, where they tell you actually you only need the book that you picked up, but then there are a bunch of rules or items or other things that aren't in the core book. So do pick up the Chronicles of Darkness core book. But consider also maybe picking up one of the Splatlines. Vampire the Requiem and Changeling the Lost are 2 games that I've spent over a year in each, and are both very fun. I'd love to get another chance to play some Vampire, and I'm currently in a Changeling game after briefly having an issue with a slightly different Changeling game, but that was due to some mechanical stuff that new books and a little bit of automation on our GM's part has actually cleaned up. So, yeah, Chronicles of Darkness. Check it out! And, you know, take a look at some of the parts that they put in here that they, you know, can't copyright, like mechanics, and see about how you can use those in your own games to maybe change around the way XP works, or look at their own publishing license. I'm not the biggest fan of it, but it is there if you want to publish stuff on Storyteller Vault. Make your own Chronicles of Darkness game. Honestly, Chronicles of Darkness, it might be the ultimate sandbox and vibe game. Check it out.